earlier today, totally unrelated to trees, my crew and I were startled by a strange, eerie crackling sound, and we turned to witness a truly amazing sight. My beautiful giant oak tree fell over, just up and fell down, and in the exact spot where my crew and I were shooting the day before. There was a crack, a boom, a thud, and then there was this. Right now, I'm just astonished, in complete shock at the sheer magnitude of the damage.
You know how I feel right now? Let's see, who do I call first? Insurance company, my favorite arborist. You know how much money this is going to cost? I mean, this is like a big stack of money.
And not just in cleanup and removal either. You see, this was more than a tree. It was an architectural feature, an enormous natural work of art that is simply impossible to replace. The good news, of course, is that no one was injured. The bad news is, well, there's all kinds of bad news. For one thing, this was my favorite tree, and it really defined the entrance to my property. Let's see, the house is damaged, the roof's got holes in it, the gutters have been ripped out, several beds are destroyed, all kinds of plants are now goners. Oh, one more thing, our producer, Teresa, her car's destroyed too. These pictures give you a clear idea of the powerful forces nature can unleash. And in this case, that force was an out-of-nowhere straight wind that blew this massive tree clean over, taking everything in its path with it, and in the process, altering the entire look of my landscape.
But now all this, what was once a shade garden, is now a full sun garden. I have to replant everything.
So just how big was this tree? Well, lighting director J.T. Graham here is probably 5'10", and he's a good 3 feet shorter than the tree's root ball. My guess is that she was as tall as she was old. According to my ring count, this tree is 105 years old. Make that was 105 years old. And that means I was born right here. So who's gonna clean up this mess? Well, one thing I can tell you for sure, not I. I may be the gardener guy, but there are limits to what I'm willing and able to do. And do yourself a favor, folks. For a big job like this, make sure you hire a professional tree service company, especially one that's licensed, bonded, and insured. Unless you understand what's involved in removing a tree this large, the situation can go from bad to worse in a hurry. Remove the wrong branch from the wrong place and the weight of the tree could shift, causing even more damage to the house. Now, since there are already 2 holes in the roof and thunderstorms are due within hours, I'm all about a well-thought-out plan by my professional arborist pals to get this job done, and get it done right. In just a minute, a 50-ton crane with an 80-foot boom will roll in here to start work. But because most driveways, including mine, simply can't support that kind of weight, the tree crew is laying plywood down to distribute the load evenly across the concrete. After the crane gets situated, it'll be followed by a chipper, which helps with the cleanup of tree debris. You won't hear the sound of chainsaws roaring on just any gardening show, folks. Okay, here's the plan. The crew begins by removing smaller limbs and branches. This so-called limbing helps distribute the weight safely and evenly around the tree. It also allows access to the main branches. As they're removed, the smaller branches are fed into the chipper. I say smaller, the fact is this baby can accommodate a log that's 18 inches in diameter. Just chews it up and spits it out. Section by section is removed and hoisted high in the air, always with the goal of protecting the property from further damage. You know, being the kind of guy that likes to look for the silver lining in things, well, at least I know that I've got plenty of firewood for years and years and years to come. Some people might hope to find the silver lining in more tangible terms, say their insurance policy. Now let me tell you something, folks. In situations like this, insurance issues can get a little tricky, and policy coverage can vary enormously. One of the first calls I made was to my insurance agent to find out what my policy does and doesn't cover. Now, the oak smacked my house pretty good on its way down, and it uplifted sidewalks and portions of my driveway, which means it damaged permanent structures. As a result, I'll be able to recoup a good portion of my losses. But get this, generally speaking, had there been no damage to the home or structures of any kind, chances are my coverage would be limited to debris removal only.
Could have been a whole lot worse.
Now I can smell the rain coming this way, and I'd say the guys have only a few hours tops to wrap things up. But having witnessed their progress up to this point, I have no doubt that they'll finish before the skies bust open. Well, almost anyway. Actually, no sooner do the guys finish getting the last hunks of tree trunk removed from the top of the car than the next force of nature rains down from the skies, with every bit as much power as my fallen oak. So they break for lunch and return in an hour to clearer skies, at least temporarily. The work continues, and just before sundown they finish the task, leaving nothing behind but a bit of sawdust and, for me, the lasting memory of that once mighty oak. Next on Gardening by the Yard, what do I do now? I think I can save the branch with a little tree surgery. Always the optimist. And finally, dealing with a big landscaping problem, so stay tuned. The tree is gone, and after having dealt with a range of emotions from astonishment to helplessness to anger, it's time to assess the damage to my landscape plants. Now basically, my plan is to save those plants that can be saved and protect those that need protection. My first stop is here at this Japanese maple, which definitely has seen better days. Actually, as bad as it looks right now, it looked a lot worse last week. In fact, I thought it was a goner because the weight of the fallen tree had forced the branches of this baby to the ground. In and of itself, this is a prized maple, and replacing it would run into the thousands of dollars. But because it's part of a matched pair, it's doubly important to me. Now, the symmetry on the backside of the tree has been destroyed due to the loss of a rather large branch. And as you saw earlier, yet another branch has been damaged considerably, and that damage extends all the way down to the trunk of the tree. However, I think I can save the branch and repair the damage to the trunk with a little tree surgery. What I'm going to do is trim the bark and some of the interior wood in such a way that I encourage the tree to callus, or heal, if you will. And to do that, I'll use a very sharp grafting knife to basically clean up the wounds. Where the outer bark is separated from the interior wood, I'll make a clean cut back to where the bark is still attached. I'll also clean up any ragged edges along the way. This is a slow process, but with any luck, the bark should begin to grow over the inner wood. Within the damaged trunk, I'll cut away any areas where the wood has been crushed, again, so the wounds will heal more quickly. Now I'm going to pack the wounds with a sort of poultice, one made from moist sphagnum peat moss. The peat moss is sterile, and it will help keep the tree tissue moist to foster healing. To keep the poultice moist and provide some insulation from the intense heat of the sun, I'll wrap the peat moss with a single layer of bubble wrap and secure it with tape. I'll check the moss periodically and moisten it when necessary so as to maintain a sort of wrung-out sponge consistency. I'll also check the wounds every couple of weeks, looking for any signs of rot, which I don't anticipate, and healing, which I can only hope for. Now, to be honest with you, I am fairly hopeful that this tree will recover completely, because Japanese maples, despite their delicate appearance, are actually amazingly resilient trees. I am concerned about both maples' exposure to full sun, because they were shaded by the oak their whole lives, but there's not much I can do about that. In fact, although the leaves may experience some tip burn in the middle of summer, it's entirely possible the tree will fill out a bit and color up even more than before due to more sunlight. Always the optimist. Here beneath the damaged maple, this bed took a big hit. One side of this brick planter collapsed, and as a result, these azaleas are in big trouble. And I've decided that trying to save these azaleas would be a lost cause. After all, I'd have to move them so that the contractors can get in here and make all the repairs to the brick planter. And moving azaleas when temperatures are in the 90s and will soon be approaching the 100s, well, that means that their odds of survival are pretty close to zero. So I'll simply remove them, and once the planter has been repaired, replace them or plant something else in their place, since I'm not all that keen on azaleas anyway. The plants below both maples, including ferns, ginger, yews, and oh so many other choice plants, all require quite a bit of shade, and they're already showing signs of sunburn. But since they too wouldn't tolerate a move at this point in time, I'm going to leave them alone and hope for the best. These dogwoods are another concern because they were once protected, that is shaded, by the oak tree, and now they're in full blazing sun. And as you know, dogwoods are true understory trees, meaning they require a good deal of shade, particularly in the afternoon. But at the moment anyway, there's not much I can do to protect them either. What I will do, however, is make sure they get plenty of water throughout the growing season so as to avoid stressing them any further. I'll also keep the shade-loving plants below the dogwoods well watered, for although they're still somewhat protected, they aren't getting near as much shade as they did a week ago. And one thing's certain about plants that prefer shade: if forced to grow in a bit of sun, they'll need plenty of water. As for this row of evergreens, well, they should be okay, although I planted them here because the oak tree shaded them in the afternoon. For now, however, I really have no choice but to leave these things well enough alone, because it's the absolute worst time of the year imaginable to transplant evergreens. I will look for signs of stress along the way, and right now I must say I'm particularly concerned about this little Sitka spruce here. And if necessary, I'll cover all these plants with some shade cloth. Obviously, I'm trying to make the most out of a bad situation, and the most frustrating part of this whole tree fiasco is that it happened at the worst possible time. By that I mean it's the worst time to try and move the majority of plants that ultimately need to be moved. So again, I'll make sure that all these plants get plenty of water, I'll protect them with shade cloth when and if necessary, and I'll wait for cooler temperatures to arrive before I move any plants to a more suitable home. Oh, I'll also wait on the contractors to fix the roof, the gutter, the planter, the driveway, the sidewalk, and I hope they don't step on any plants in the process. Don't go away. I'll be starting all over in just a moment. The final step in having my once mighty, majestic oak removed was the grinding of the stump, a task that took place last week. It's a sad sight, isn't it? And now all that's left is this pile of dirt mixed with a bunch of wood chips. But rather than fret any further, it's time to move on. It's also time to do something about this bare spot so I don't have to stare at it all the time and constantly be reminded of my personal tree tragedy. The soil's had time to settle, so I'm going to rake the area well, removing any large chips I encounter along the way, level it, and tamp the soil. I'm also going to spread a good 10 pounds of blood meal over the area to boost the soil's nitrogen content. You see, this area is still full of wood chips, and as those wood chips decompose, they'll rob the soil of any and all available nitrogen. The blood meal, which is 12% nitrogen, will help balance the nitrogen content of the soil and further the whole process of decomposition. And it's important to achieve that balance because what I plan on planting here next needs nitrogen as well. That something is grass seed. In this case, a turf-type tall fescue, which I'll spread by hand evenly over the area and water well. Actually, this isn't the ideal grass for what is now a sunny spot, nor is this the ideal time to sow it. But if I keep it well watered, it just might germinate and grow well enough to cover the bare ground at least until fall, when I can sow seed again. Now, to tell you the truth, I've considered a number of different possibilities for this spot. I may just let the grass grow. I may put in a really nice big water garden. I may do a really cool rock garden. But at the moment, well, frankly, I'm thinking about the most optimistic gesture of all. Namely, planting an acorn, so that in another 100 years, there'll be another mighty, majestic oak in this same spot. See, I told you I was a silver lining kind of guy. Come on, little acorn, grow, grow, little acorn. Well, that about does it for today, and it's a good thing, because I got a lot of firewood to cut. I'm Paul James, the gardener guy for Gardening by the Yard. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.